Hey everybody, I'm Joshua Orro, the Mustang Prince, and welcome to Mustang Prince Orro Reports. You know, after looking at several MCU movies this year, I realized that I never got to share my experience at Avengers Campus, which opened at Disney California Adventure last year. My very first visit to that new area was during September 3rd, 2021, and to me, while it didn't really offer too much due to its space, it was pretty promising, and I'm glad that I got to share that experience with a few friends over the past few months. Plus, that area still brings back fond childhood memories of A Bug's Land, and I'm really hoping that the Quinjet becomes a ride soon. Also to note, I heard that the French Avengers campus just opened recently. Anyway, let's talk about the main reason why we're here today. As most of you know, the reason why I'm blogging several MCU Infinity Saga movies is mainly to get folks hyped for the new Thor movie, which I've still not seen yet, but have heard good things about. Also, I've already blogged the first and third Thor films, but what are my thoughts on the second one? Well, that's what we're going to find out today. Released on November 8th, 2013, the movie is Thor: The Dark World. Now, on for the plot of the movie. In ancient times, the gods of Asgard fought and won a war against an evil race known as the Dark Elves. The survivors were neutralized, and their ultimate weapon, the Aether, was buried in a secret location. Hundreds of years later, Jane Foster finds the Aether and becomes its host, forcing Thor to bring her to Asgard before Dark Elf leader Malekith captures her and uses the weapon to destroy the 9 realms, including Earth. Now, what are my thoughts on the movie? Well, this is another MCU movie that I didn't see in theaters at the time, but after watching it on Netflix and on Blu-ray, I enjoyed it. Yeah, it's not as good compared to the first and third Thor movies, but it's a much better film than, well, other movies that were released during 2013. But now, let's head over to Mustang Notes. Development of a Thor sequel began in April 2011 when producer Kevin Feige announced plans for it to follow the MCU crossover movie The Avengers in 2012. During July, Thor director Kenneth Branagh withdrew from the sequel, with Brian Kirk and Patty Jenkins considered to replace him as director, before Alan Taylor was hired in January 2012. Filming took place from September to December 2012, primarily in Surrey, England, as well as in Iceland and London. Taylor wanted the movie to be more grounded than Thor, inspired by his work on Game of Thrones. Originally, Carter Burwell was hired to compose the score, but Marvel replaced Burwell with Brian Taylor. The film's visual effects were completed by 7 special effects studios, including Double Negative and Luma Pictures, as well as Blur Studio being in charge of the movie's prologue sequence. Now, this may be the weakest movie in the MCU Infinity Saga to most audiences, but nowadays, this is considered as one of the most important ones. Why? Well, it's because, like the Avengers, this movie features one of the 6 Infinity Stones, the Aether, which contains the Reality Stone, which grants its user absolute control over the fabric of reality itself. Now, to me, this has got to be the most unique Infinity Stone ever, due to the Aether being a dark red liquid. The history behind this stone goes back eons ago, when the Dark Elves intended to use the stone to revert the universe to its state of primordial darkness, until Thor's grandfather, King Bor, used the Bifrost Bridge to snatch the Aether before its destructive power could be unleashed, and saw that the Aether was hidden away on a distant world, which happened to be at the abandoned Vinyl factory in London, UK. At the end of the movie, the Aether is given to Taneleer Tavan, aka the Collector, from the planet Nowhere. Also, I think the setting in London is very nostalgic due to the fact that I've been there with my family back in summer 2010. Also, I think Asgard still looks very breathtaking, and the battles in Greenwich and in the Dark World, known as Svalbardheim, are really thrilling, and I think the mythology in this movie is really thought-provoking, but also pretty interesting at the same time. And now, let's move on to the cast. Our hero, Thor, is played again by Chris Hemsworth, whom was in the 2009 Star Trek reboot, 2015's Vacation, and the 2016 Ghostbusters reboot. To me, Thor hasn't really changed a lot since New York 2012, and I still think Thor's thunder powers are really amazing. Plus, I think he's a real noble warrior and a man of honor, and I like that he fights for the greater good. However, Thor still shows a bit of a reckless side, like when he, Loki, and Jane leave Asgard against Odin's orders. Also, I deeply respect Thor's choice when, at the end of the movie, he declines Odin's offer to take the throne. Next is his adopted brother, Loki, played again by Tom Hiddleston, whom was in The Pirate Fairy, Kong Skull Island, and Aardman's Early Man. Now, this movie is where Loki starts to change from villain to ally. After his defeat in New York, Thor returned Loki to Asgard, where Odin condemned him to spend the rest of his life in the Asgardian dungeons as punishment for his crimes. However, when his mother Frigga was killed during the sacking of Asgard, Loki was freed by Thor in order to defeat the Dark Elves. In my opinion, I think Loki does make a pretty good change in character in this film. Also, I still think he makes a really sneaky trickster, and his illusion tricks really had me fooled a couple times. Plus, even though it was in reality a fake out, I thought Loki made a very heroic sacrifice. Next we come to Thor's father, Odin, ruler of Asgard, played by Anthony Hopkins, whom was in The Mask of Zorro, Robert Zemeckis' Beowulf, and he narrated Ron Howard's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. To me, while Odin is a wise, honorable ruler who believes in responsibility, duty, and honor, he still has a very good sense of pride that borders along with his arrogance, and Odin can be a real hypocrite. Plus, Odin can be very vengeful, like during the moment after his wife got killed. However, unbeknownst to Thor, after faking his death, Loki casts a spell that banished Odin to New York. Next we come to Jane Foster, once again played by Natalie Portman, who played Padme Amidala in the Star Wars prequel trilogy. To me, Jane has gotten a much bigger role in this film compared to the 2011 movie. You see, during her time living in London, Jane and her colleagues are investigating a series of bizarre anomalies, including a levitating truck and several objects vanishing and sometimes reappearing in a different location, until she discovers and gets possessed by the Aether. Also, after hearing about Thor's return through the footage of the New York battle, Jane felt very disappointed and angry that Thor didn't attempt to contact her sooner. Plus, I think Jane is one of the luckiest mortals, next to Bruce Banner, to ever see Asgard in person. Also, I know I have not seen Thor Love and Thunder yet, but I have a little theory that the reason why Jane gets superpowers was perhaps a side effect from the Aether. I think. Next is Jane's mentor and colleague, Dr. Eric Selvig, played by Stellan Skarsgård, whom was in the Mamma Mia movies, Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3, King Arthur, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and the 2015 Cinderella remake. To me, Eric has a very disruptive role in this movie, due to him getting arrested in Stonehenge for indecent exposure and annoying tourists. However, I thought Eric's most memorable moments were when he explains what the convergence is, when he and Jane placed devices to try to stop the anomalies that were happening, and when he saves Thor and Jane by teleporting the Dark Elves ship into the Dark World. Next we have Darcy Lewis, played by Kat Dennings. To me, Darcy is a devoted college student with a lot of compassion, ambition, and intellect, with her heart usually, if not always, in the right place. Plus, she's extremely goal-oriented, and she takes great pride in her achievements. Also, I must mention that during this movie, Darcy gains a boyfriend named Ian Boothby, and Darcy is also one of the few who survived Thanos' snap, while Jane and Eric sadly didn't. Another character to talk about is Thor's mother, Frigga, played by Renee Russo, who played Natasha in The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle. To me, Frigga is a strong woman, a majestic queen, and despite her attention to protocol, she is a loving and tender mother to both her sons. In this film, when Thor brings Jane Foster to Asgard to protect her from the powers of the Aether, Frigga takes care of her and defends her against the attacking Dark Elves, even sacrificing herself at the hands of Malekith to ensure her safety. While it was a very tragic fate, Frigga's death thankfully allowed Loki to reconsider his life choices and join with his brother to avenge her death. Finally, we come to the movie's main villain, Malekith, the ruler of the Dark Elves, played by Christopher Eccleston, whom I only remember from G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra. Malekith and his race have thrived in primordial darkness ever since before the Big Bang. To me, not only is he one of Thor's most dangerous enemies, but he's also a bitter, cynical, cold elf bent on revenge. His evil plan is to avenge the loss of elves, but he ends up getting more killed in his failed attempts. Plus, Malekith is not very bright, as the only thing he can think of to conjure with the Aether is waves of dark energy, which deeply contrasts Thanos in his evident lack of creativity. And now let's move on to my final words. Overall, Thor: The Dark World isn't really that bad of a movie. Yeah, it does have its flaws, like its lack of depth, as well as Malekith being a bit of a generic villain, but still, the action is epic and thrilling, it offers plenty of humor, the visuals and cinematography is pretty good, and the characters from Thor, Jane, Loki, and a few others are still as lovable and memorable. Plus, nowadays, courtesy of the Reality Stone, this is one of the Infinity Saga's most important movies, and it really deserves a watch if you want to fully immerse yourself further into the MCU. As for my rating, I'll give it a 73% out of 100. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to join me next time where we reunite with a group of superheroes from outer space. Mustang Power.